What's up, guys? It's Bog. I'm here with UFC featherweight Julian Erosa. Juno, man.
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, bro. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thank you for getting on the show, man. Let's just start off. How was training, man? How if you went to training today or
I actually, I think about a week ago, I was at an open mat here in town, and I was grappling I popped my knee. Um, it wasn't bad. It was weird because like my knee. I mean, being a fighter, throughout the years, your body's never 100%, and everything on me, kind of snap, crackles, and pops all the time. And so my knee always kind of clicks in and out. And but when I was grappling, it made a pop noise that that you would associate with like an ACL or LCL or something. And so I was really worried about it when I heard it, but I kept grappling and everything seemed fine. The next morning, my knee was a little stiff, and so I went into the PI, and turns out that I have a small, I had basically the most minor tear you can have in your LCL, which is not a huge deal. I can do basically everything right now, and actually, honestly, it feels like it's like not even injured anymore. It's only been 5 or 6 days, and so I'm pretty positive within the next week and a half I'll be back to training 100%. But it's one of those things that kind of made me take half a step back, and honestly, I'm lucky that it wasn't as serious as it could have been because the popping noise that it made during practice sounded pretty bad, and so I'm lucky that it was as minor as it is, and probably I would say middle of next week I'll be back to training.
man, that's good that it was a minor. I'm sorry to hear that you popped your knee because I know you're a guy that loves to get in the gym and
Yeah.
train in one of the best gyms in the world. Talk to me about this year, man. 2024 has been such a good year for you. You had your first son. You fought twice this year. You got two finishes, one in front of a crowd and one at the start of the year against Ramos. Just talk to me about how your year's been so far, man.
Yeah, man. These are the type of scenarios that you like. For me especially, I was coming off of two losses, Caceres and Padilla, back in 2023, and having that Ramos fight, I felt like my back was against the wall a little bit. But I don't necessarily put undue pressure on myself. I just, it's just a fight. But obviously, there's going to be a little bit in the back of your head. 3 losses in the UFC doesn't really go well, most times. And so, and I've been there before. I've been cut from the UFC multiple times, and so going to the Ramos fight, I was a little worried about that. And obviously having my son 8 days before that fight was a bit overwhelming. Not necessarily for me specifically, but it can be overwhelming for most. But I'm one of those people that's really good at compartmentalizing things. And I was having my son, and then I was fighting, but I wasn't going to let one of them take away from the other one. And I was just going to kind of focus on one thing at a time. And after my son was born and kind of watching that go down, it was very, inspirational, and for me to go out there. I kind of owed it to my wife, to my newborn son, to go out there and at least perform to my capabilities that I knew I could do. One of the things that's like the hardest thing to get over is to go in there and fight and lose a fight that you didn't give 100%. And so I just want to go out and fight Ramos at 100%. And he caught me early on in that fight, and I was being a little too relaxed. But that's kind of my style, anyways. It's kind of kill or be killed. And so, for me to be able to grab his neck and put him away pretty quickly in the first round was ideal for me, and was something that I really needed to kind of get my bearings back underneath me and try to get a winning streak together, like I had previously, a couple years ago.
And you are on one right now as well. You just submitted Christian Rodriguez in July
Yeah.
at UFC. What was it, Denver, I believe? It
Yes.
was a first round guillotine choke, and I know you love jumping those darce chokes and gillies. I mean, you have 41 MMA fights. You're at this point of your career, you're a veteran. We can call you that. 3 different runs in the UFC. Just talk to me. What are your goals at this stage of your career? As someone on Twitter asked.
For me, it's just more about like I said earlier, just performing at my at my best on those nights. That's the toughest thing, is to be able to translate what you do in the gym into the cage on those given nights. And so with the Christian fight, I really felt like I was able to do that. And I felt really good in that fight. And I felt like maybe it was a little bit of the crowd. I was kind of falling in love with the Apex because I was doing well there, and that's where I got my job back against Sean Woodson on short notice. I fought Jourdain on slightly short notice as well. and did really well in both those fights. And then, knocked out Nate Landwehr at the Apex. I had the Steven Peterson fight, which is crazy at the Apex. I mean, I was falling in love with the Apex because of the performances I was having there. But once I went to the T-Mobile with Hakeem Dawodu, I really felt like having the crowd was more of a advantage versus a disadvantage. And so, fighting Ramos at the Apex and then getting the opportunity to go to Colorado and kind of redeem myself, because I fought Devontae Smith over in Colorado on a few weeks' notice, got my job back with the UFC, and honestly, I should have not taken that fight because it was up weight class against a guy that hits like a truck, and I've never had the best of chin, and so I should have just waited and got a fight at featherweight, because my manager told me, hey, we can take this fight with Devontae Smith in 3 weeks at Colorado. It's up weight class. How do you feel about that? And I was like, man, fuck yeah, I'm down, but I was a bit too eager. Sometimes I think my eagerness got the best of me. And so to go back there and fight Christian Rodriguez on that day was, kind of a redemption for me, and something I wanted to go there and just get it back. And even walking into the back locker rooms where we get warmed up, I was like, man, this is where I was last time when I got knocked out by Devontae. And so understanding and remembering those feelings that I had after that fight and how bad I wanted it back really gave me a little bit of a little bit more push. And then obviously walking out and seeing the crowd, it kind of really amps you up. And that's kind of, I feel like my style is predicated on being a fan favorite and kind of showing out for the crowd. And so having the crowd versus not having the crowd is beneficial to me, because I really enjoy it and I feed off that energy. I think a lot of people do, especially, fighters in general. I think we do this because we enjoy kind of, showcasing what we can do in front of people. And so having people sitting there screaming your name, whether they know you or not, and trying to make those people your fans afterwards is definitely an incentive for me. And so I really did enjoy doing it in front of the crowd. And I would prefer the crowd now more than the Apex.
And yeah, that's one of the biggest things to deal with in fighting in front of the UFC, fighting in front of thousands of fans in the biggest arena you've ever fought in. And speaking of lightweight against Devontae Smith, you had a fight with a current top 15 lightweight, Paddy Pimblett, back in Cage Warriors. I've been getting so many questions about this one, so I had to ask you. What did you think of that fight? Because I watched it back, and personally, I thought it was 49-46 for you. What do you think of Paddy as a fighter, and what do you think of the time you guys fought? And
I think with Paddy, that was a bit of a mistake on my part as well to even go fight him, because I got cut from the UFC. I had no real management at least, and so getting cut from the UFC, I figured, I had gotten a couple wins right after the UFC. I fought 2 fights and won both of them by finishes, and one of them was for a belt, and on a regional scene. And then I was like, my coach had offered me, hey, do you want to go to Cage Warriors in London, fight for Conor McGregor's old featherweight belt? And I was like, well, in my mind, I was thinking, if I get that, there's no way the UFC can say no to me. Like, they gotta bring me back in. I just figured like that was the route to get back to the UFC. But honestly, like in hindsight, if I had good management and that, I could have beat a tomato can. I had 3 wins in a row in the UFC. Probably would have pushed me back in, depending on my management. And so that was a bit of a mistake in my career. But that was a long time ago too. That was before I think things were getting to the point where management was helping guys as much as they do nowadays. But he was younger at the time. I was a bit older, I had more experience, and I think that's what really played out in that fight was my ability to kind of overcome, maybe a little bit of adversity in that fight. I mean, he took me down, held me down, and he was a bit unusual. I never trained with anybody that was as dominant and flexible as he was in the grappling. And so it was kind of a learning lesson, like in the fight, but I was able to come back and really kind of walk him down for the last couple of rounds and dropped him a couple of times, hurt him pretty bad. Even in between rounds, he had a hard time getting back to his stool. And then he ended up throwing up and kind of went viral. He threw up a bunch of like chocolate and blood, and everybody's like, "Oh, he threw a bunch of chocolate," in the post fight interview in the cage for the belt. And a lot of people thought I won that fight. Gained a whole bunch of fans in the UK because of that fight, and so it helped me out in the long run, with my fan base a little bit over there. But I did think I won that fight. It was a bit of a setup. I think his manager was also the matchmaker and promoter of Cage Warriors. I can't remember the guy's name, but that's a bit shady in its own in its right, in its own right. And but you can't deny someone that has good skills, and Paddy has grown to be a good mixed martial artist. People ask me if I would fight him again. I'd probably fight him at 55 because I know you can't make featherweight anymore, but featherweight's more my weight class. But if they had offered me the fight at 55, I would. He's probably one of the only guys, not necessarily the only guys, but he's one of the guys at 55 that I would take for sure, just because I think it'd be fun to get that fight back and just to see who's evolved the most from the first fight that we had. But I can't deny, he's had some pretty good performances in the UFC. I still think he needs to be tested with, a bit higher up competition. But and it's also like it's a bit tough too because the guy only fights like once a year, so it's hard to really gauge where he's at and what he's got going on. He just had a couple of kids, or I think he just had twins himself. So I know he's probably going through that kind of the whole daddy process as well. So, but yeah, I got nothing against him. I just more the circumstances and the situation that happened. I was a bit salty, but it builds character. That's something going through that and having that fight. I mean, I had the worst weight cut for that fight, and I made weight. I actually didn't even see Paddy make weight. He missed weight by a couple, like 2 or 3 pounds, and then he went to go cut the rest of the weight, and I waited for him at the scale, and like almost 2 hours had gone by, and that's all they were going to give him was like 2 hours. It had almost been 2 hours, and I hadn't had any food. I just had fluids, and I was drinking, and I was like, man, I'm hungry. Let's just get the fuck out of here. Like, fuck it. Like, he makes weight. If he doesn't, he doesn't. And they said he made weight, but I wasn't there, and it was his promoter, the manager, same guy that's kind of running the show, and so who knows if he really made weight or not. But it was a good experience. It was fun to go over there and fight, but it was definitely a little bit of a mistake as early on in my career as it was, and so that's the only thing I regret. But I don't regret fighting him and just kind of taking that experience.
And you mentioned how much he's evolved as a fighter. You've also evolved so much. You fought like how many times? I think it's been over 15 fights at least since that. It's been a lot. And obviously in the spot you're in right now, it's because of how much you've evolved, how much you keep getting better as a fighter in the best gym in the world. And another thing, in your division of featherweight, there's an upcoming title fight between Ilya Topuria and Max Holloway. I wanted your thoughts on that. Who do you think is going to win?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of riding the Taporia train. But I just been such a big fan of Max for so long, and obviously the new up and coming guys are like the shiny new toy, and like, oh my god, this guy's amazing. They can be big fans of it, and I'm a huge fan of Taporia as well. But Max is one of those guys that's been there for so long. I mean, he fought McGregor, such a long time ago.
Yeah.
He's fought everybody and done so well in the sport. And I'm from Vegas, where I live in Vegas now. And at our gym, we train with a lot of Hawaiians, and so we have that Hawaiian spirit in the gym. And so I kind of got to be riding with Max Bless Holloway. And he just, he always like even after a little bit of adversity, Max will always come back and like not even just in fights in general, but just coming back to the next fight. And he really, really seems like he sharpens himself if he has made any mistakes in the prior fights. And so it will be a good indicator to see how good Ilya Taporia is. And I've heard nothing but great stories and how much of a savage that guy is in the gym. So it will be interesting to see if he is really, above and beyond, and if the level is different between him and Max. But man, Max's last fight was insane. So like you can never doubt him out either. I mean, that's just like that. The Hawaiian fighting spirit of him just like, pointing in the ground and going hard with Gaethje, who's like one of the scariest 55ers with the hardest punch in the, probably in the division. And just saying, you know what, screw it. I'm ahead 4.5 rounds. Let's just, swing to the death. And he was able to, put an exclamation point on that fight. And so it'll be a good one. It'll be fun. And obviously I'm a big fan of both these guys. And it's my weight class, so I'll be tuning in for sure. And it's just gonna be a fun one. I mean, it's gonna be hard. I think it's more of a coin flip in my mind.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe you could be fighting one of these guys in the near future. You're very close to the top 15 of your weight class, and these guys are obviously at the top of the ladder, but you could be up there very soon, considering the spot you're in, the amount of fights the way you're performing. And another thing is you have probably one of the best resumes at featherweight. You've beaten guys like Sean Woodson, Nate the Train, Christian Rodriguez. uh, Hakeem Dawodu, Sean Woodson, Jamal Emmers. The list goes on.
Thank you, bro.
uh,
I appreciate that.
of course, man. I wanted to ask you, out of any of your wins, you have 30 of them in your MMA career. Which one stands out the most about for you?
I mean, I would have to say the Sean Woodson fight, only because it was that one fight that got me back in the UFC after me. Like I felt like I honestly felt like I would never fight in the UFC again. I was 1-4. I was coming off of 3 losses. They cut me. COVID hit. I was like, I was literally this close to going home. I'm originally from Washington State, going home and just reevaluating what I was going to do in life, whether it was like go back to school, become a teacher, do this or do that. And so and then COVID hit, and everybody was kind of in a lockdown situation. So we just said, you know what, we'll just hang out here. I'll keep training, and we'll see what happens. And luckily for me, the UFC was like the only sports event going. Nothing else was going on. So my management, I gotta praise them for this because they were the ones that kind of kept me in the loop. Like, hey man, people are falling out every single week because of COVID. People can't travel over here. And that's how it was. It was literally every single week there was like 3 or 4 guys that were getting pulled from cards because of COVID or being able to transport themselves over here. And I think the fight that I got with Sean Woodson was originally supposed to be Kyle Nelson was supposed to fight Sean Woodson, and obviously Canada's pretty bad with the was pretty bad with the lockdowns and stuff. And so I got lucky, and actually not even me. They went with Daniel Pineda. They went with him over me, and then Daniel Pineda couldn't pass the COVID test, and so I was like the third option. And I, been called by my manager, and kind of my hopes were given up a little bit because he thought for sure it was going to be me, and then they ended up going with Pineda, and he had to call me back and was like, "Hey man, I'm sorry." And I was actually at the place to get my medicals done, to start doing my medicals just to get that fight. It was like a Tuesday before the fight, and then called me and said, "Sorry man, like they went with Pineda." And I was like, "Yeah, no worries." He's like, "But stay ready, something will happen." And then I went home, and then I can't remember if it was that night or the next day, but he called me back and said, "It's you, man. Daniel couldn't pass a COVID test, and you're up." And I was like, "All right, let's get it done." So Wednesday was when I finally knew I had that fight. But my management had told me for like 4 or 5 weeks that the possibility was pretty high for me to get a fight as long as I stayed ready, had my medicals ready, because I'm in Vegas, and all the only fights they were having were basically the Apex for a decent amount of time before they went to Fight Island, and so luckily for me, they were keeping me in the loop, and we ended up doing a catch weight, so that was good for me because I took it on like 3 days notice. But yeah, that was the fight that got me back in. That really put my name back on the map, and to beat a guy whose only loss is to me right now, and to beat him the way I did was like such a embodiment of my fight style. Like I've always been one of those guys that's just always gonna be there. You can beat me up for 14 minutes. You give me that last minute, I'm gonna take it. And that's kind of how that fight was. I probably going in the third round, I was like down maybe a couple of rounds, I would say, but my spirits weren't down. And I didn't even care about that. I was like in my mind, I felt like the fight was starting to go my way, and that it's just a matter of time. If I had enough time on the clock, I was gonna get him out of there, and I was able to do that. And so to get my job back, to have a fight like I did, and not only that, I was so upset about getting cut from the UFC and never being able to showcase my skill set in the UFC before I thought my career was going to be up. And so to get that fight and just to have that one fight, if I would have got cut after that, they said, you know what, even though you beat Woodson, we're still gonna it's like whatever, like you're not gonna fight in the UFC anymore. Like I would have been happy at the time with just that because all I wanted to do was to showcase what I could do in the cage or on the big stage in the UFC because people watch me do this in the regional scene so many times. I have so many local fans that and back in Washington that have watched me fight numerous times on the regional scene and do really well against everybody over there. And so, but then some people start to doubt if you're up to the level of the UFC. Fighting guys and beating guys on the regional scene is one thing, but to do it in the UFC against some of the best in the world is another. So just to check that off, on my bucket list was one of the biggest things for me.
And man, this run in the UFC, this third one has been so well for you. Look at you. I think you've won 5 of your last 7. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think I'm 7-3 since that Woodson fight. So, and I honestly feel like this stint in the UFC is how my UFC career should have gone originally. But I do feel as if it's one of those things that just it kind of helps you, in the long run and builds the character and helps you, really appreciate things like me being out of the UFC, getting cut a couple times from the UFC. I did the Ultimate Fighter, did the Contender Series, didn't even get signed off Contender Series, which was crazy. But just kind of dealing with that adversity really kind of made me want to put my head down and just keep grinding it and just know that eventually it's going to happen. Just stay ready. And sure enough, it did, and it played out the way it did. And luckily for me, I still, have my job with the UFC, and and I'm on a 2-fight winning streak, which is it's always a way better feeling when you're coming off of wins, even if it's just one win, than it is when you're coming off losses.
Yeah, and actually, you mentioned you were both on Contender Series and the Ultimate Fighter. Not many fighters can say that they were on both.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that debate, like between the old fans and the new fans, like which one's better, Ultimate Fighter or Contender Series. You've been on both. You were a finalist on the Ultimate Fighter, I believe, or a semifinalist.
Yes.
And on the Contender Series, you knocked out Jamal Emmers. I want to ask you, what do you think is better, Contender Series or the Ultimate Fighter?
I would have to say, on my personal experience, I would say Contender Series is better for a handful of reasons. Obviously, one of the biggest reasons is it's just like a regular fight week. You don't have to do the 6-7 weeks in the house. And I know one season of the Ultimate Fighter was live. It was the one like Michael Chiesa won, and he told me that it was actually like twice as long because they did it live. So and the 7 weeks that I was on it felt like an eternity for me. So I can't imagine what it would be like to be there for, like 14, 15, 16 weeks. So to do and then also you have to fight numerous times on the Ultimate Fighter, and they're not even counted as fights. So you're just doing exhibitions. And I think the reason why they do exhibitions is so you can continuously fight and not get suspended because in the UFC, even if you have the easiest fight, you get suspended. It's a mandatory 7 days. And if it's a hard fight, they'll do. It's up to their discretion. It's up to their and the doctors there how long that suspension will be. If you get knocked out, it's a TKO is 30 days mandatory, and if you get knocked out, it's 60 days for sure. But so the Ultimate Fighter, I think, does the exhibition so you can fight even if it's a hard fight, you won't get suspended, and you can. Those guys. I fought 4 times in 7 weeks. Didn't get paid for any of it. Actually, I got fight of the season, so that helped me out, and we got paid we got paid like I think it was like $700 a week just to be there, just like a little stipend for us to get paid while we're there. But besides that, for the actual fights, we got paid nothing. And so it's 4 fights, basically 4 UFC fights I had to do for free. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Fighting's like how I am, or it's exactly who I am. So I enjoyed that, but. Like hindsight, it's like, man, I'd rather have done just the contenders because contenders is 1 fight and you get paid for it. You get paid half the starting rate as the UFC, and then and it's like you're on like a mini UFC card. So that was fun. It was, and then I was in Vegas living here, so it was like I just drove down there, made weight, came home, and then drove down there and fought. So it was really easy. With the Ultimate Fighter, I had to fight to get in the house, which is also something that was a bit more difficult for us. On that season was we had to fight to get in the house. A lot of people don't have to do that. So we fought to get in the house. My family was there, and then they're like, "See you later." And then I didn't have my phone, didn't have anything, so I couldn't contact them for 7-8 weeks. So that was a bit draining in its own right. Not for me specifically, but for a lot of guys, I could tell it was definitely taking a toll on them. People that have families, kids, their wives back at home. I had a girlfriend at the time that we'd been together for quite a while, but I didn't have kids. I didn't have any family members in the hospital that I had to worry about while I was on the show. So I didn't have to go through as much adversity with that kind of situation as some of the other guys did in the house. But I enjoyed it. It was an experience that I want to change, for anything else. But for sure, Contender Series is always the way to go.
And on the Ultimate Fighter, I think one of the most viral clips from that season is your argument on the next to the swimming pool with the Chris guy. I couldn't say his last name. What happened there? Yeah, and what happened there? And have you guys resolved it?
Yeah, that was just one of those kind of one of those nights we drank a little too much, and honestly, we weren't like drinking all the time on the show. We just that particular night, a lot of guys were already out of the competition, and I think Chris was out of the competition. I think we were just playing pool, and we were all just kind of taking shots and messing around, and just had a little too much to drink. But what really the whole thing what had happened was to get in the house, we had to fight to get in the house. Artem Lobov lost to Mehdi Baghdad, and Artem Lobov was notoriously Connor's right hand man. So he lost to get in the house, and so with the UFC, Dana White, and all those guys, what I assumed happened was that they wanted to get Artem in the house regardless, and so they brought him back, and they brought Johnny Nunez back as well to even the teams out. But there was 9 guys on both sides, so if 9 guys fight, there's 9 winners. You can't evenly match up 9 guys. There's going to be there's going to be a guy that's it's odd numbers, and so what Dana White said was not only do you have to win, but you have to win excitingly, because the least exciting fight out of the 9 winners is going to get just dropped. So not only did you have to win, but there was incentive to go out there and fight even better. And so Chris Gritzmacher, I think, was the very first fight of those first 9 fights from being in the house, first or second fight. He might have been the first one. And he won his fight, but it was boring. He just laid on the kid. And I understand. Like, it was like, I totally get it 100%. He was the first guy out. He's trying to get, just trying to maintain his spot in the house. So he won his fight. It was a little boring. And then, as the fights were going on, there was 6, 7, 8 fights. I was, I think it was me and like 2 other guys had a fight still. And I'm like, oh man, this is easy. Like, as long as you win your fight, you guys are gonna be good, because Chris's fight was the most boring. Like, it was just a fact. Like, it wasn't like a big deal. But after we had drank a little bit, I was talking to Tom Galicchio that was on the show as well, and I started talking about it, and Chris was behind me, he overheard me, and so then we kind of went back and forth about it, and he got upset with me, and it is what it is. I think it was mainly to do with the alcohol. I had nothing. I mean, if we would have had the conversation, it would have been pretty chill. But what was kind of funny, because what ended up happening is after the 9 fights, Dana came out and dropped Chris Gritzmacher because his fight was the least exciting, and it was just a fact that I was saying, and I just kind of uncomfortable fact that he didn't want to, I guess, maybe deal with, and so he got upset about it, and it is what it is. But we're cool now. I mean, I don't necessarily talk to him anymore, but we had already talked after the show, and we both know it was just kind of one of those stupid nights, and we kind of just drank too much and let our emotions get the best of us. But I thought that was a bit shady on the show. For all the other guys, because we had to deal with that. Like Artem was given a free pass, and that kind of sucked too, because I ended up beating Mehdi Baghdad my very first fight in the house after I beat Jason Soros to get in the house. I fought Mehdi Baghdad, beat him. I fought Abner Lovas, and then I had to fight Artem after that, and Artem knocked me out. But if Artem don't get back in the house, I probably would have fought somebody else, or I would have made it to the finale, maybe, possibly. I mean, who knows? Maybe I would have lost that next fight anyways. But it just felt a little bit unfair that a guy, just because he was best friends with Connor, was going to get kind of not a free ride, but he was going to get a second chance. So that was a little bit discouraging for a lot of the other guys. But obviously, just doing the show was fun for everybody, and it was one of the first times I'd ever been away from home for as long as I was. It was almost like a summer camp for fighters. So that was pretty cool.
And you mentioned that you don't necessarily talk with Chris anymore, but and obviously that season's been about 9 years ago, which is crazy. So I wanted to ask you, I always see you showing support for Billy Quarantillo, who was also on that season of Ultimate Fighter. Is there any other fighters from that show that you keep up with, that you are in touch with?
Not necessarily. I mean, me and Johnny Nunez, because him and Misha Tate are together, and Misha has been a longtime friend of mine. So, and Johnny trains at Extreme Couture, so he's probably the closest one I am with on the show, besides Billy, I would say. But everybody else, everybody kind of had a falling out. I mean, not necessarily falling out, but I mean, you're only on the show for 6, 7, 8 weeks, so you'll stay in touch with guys here and there. But if you're not seeing each other on a regular basis, it's hard to keep up. I reached out to Ton Lee after he had won the belt over at ONE FC. It might have not been right after he won it, but I reached out to him afterwards and just kind of congratulated him on his success over there, because I like Ton. Me and Ton got along really well in the house. Me, Ton, and Billy, we were all kind of like and Tom Galicchio. I mean, there was a lot of guys on the show that we got along well with. But like I said, you're only on there for so long, and so you start to fall out with guys, especially if guys aren't fighting anymore. Me and Billy are kind of in the same spot, about the same age, same weight class, in and out of the UFC. I mean, he never really was in and out of the UFC, but after the Ultimate Fighter, he didn't get signed. I got signed off the Ultimate Fighter because I ended up beating Marcin in the finale for basically third place. But me and Billy, we have a similar. Billy even went into contenders as well. So me and Billy have very similar stories. And and people think we actually kind of look alike. So and I've trained with Billy quite a bit. He comes out to Vegas periodically, and so every time he comes out, he reaches out, and me and him will get some training in, maybe go get some lunch and stuff. So yeah, I would say me and Billy are probably the closest from the Ultimate Fighter.
That's awesome to hear, man. You are both like in your own ways. You guys are great fighters, great humans. And I also wanted to ask you. You did mention at the start of the interview that you have a little tear in your knee. I
Yeah.
think it was. So do you think that's gonna factor you out of fighting for the rest of the this year? Obviously, there's like a limited amount of UFC events left because we're approaching October. There's only 2 months of fights left, and obviously the holiday break they take. Uh, do we expect Julian Erosa to get back in there one more time before the year's end?
Yeah, for sure. Literally this little knee issue. I would say maybe he's taking like altogether like 2 weeks, away from me training hard in the gym. But I've checked my Instagram stories. I've been, riding my bike. Basically, the only thing I can really do is kind of ride my bike. But if you give me something to do, I'll do to the furthest extent. So, I've been on my bike 3 hours yesterday and 3 hours the day before. And because it's the only thing I can do. I can hit the bag. I have a bag in my garage, and I can still do some things. So I'm still working hard, regardless if it's in the gym or if it's outside the gym. I do want to fight, one more time before the year is up, and I'm willing to fight, whenever, really. I don't think my knee's going to be a big issue. Honestly, I got really lucky because the way it popped, and I've heard knees pop before, and it's usually never good. When you hear a knee pop the way mine popped, it's usually pretty bad news. But luckily for me, I don't know if it's because of the physical activity that I do. I run a lot, I ride my bike a lot, and I just train a lot. I'm training year round because body in motion stays in motion. I really truly believe that, and I think it helps with injuries like this. And so I think it could have been bad, but luckily for me, just the way it happened, it's very minor. It's honestly, I know guys that fight with torn ACLs. I have friends that fight with shitty shoulders. We're all beat up all the time. So this is very minor, in the grand scheme of it all. And just a couple weeks off the mats, I'll be back to 100% to normal. Within probably like a week from now. So I'm willing to fight November, December if they'll give it to me. If not, early next year. But I really want to get another fight. I would love to have 3 fights this year and try to go 3-0, and possibly 3 guillotines would be amazing.
Jump the gilly, and obviously Dustin actually tweeted that as well after your last
Yeah.
fight. That was pretty sick. And also, before I let you go, you did submit Christian Rodriguez in your last fight, and when I tweeted, I got an interview with Juicy J coming up on Saturday. Surprisingly, a lot of people, not only in the comments, they DM me, they were asking me to ask you to tell you, to thank you that you submitted Christian Rodriguez, because I think a lot of people have something against him. I don't know what's up with that, but I also want to thank you because I have my own reasons. Because this dude, he kept missing weight, he kept beating prospects up, uh, and he was acting like a dickhead to some fighters, even though he was the one missing weight. And
Yeah.
everyone wants to thank you for choking that dude out.
Yeah, the thing about I think some people get the wrong idea with some guys. Obviously, for me, I always come across as a really good dude because that's just kind of my personality. But I think with Christian, I think he's just a very quiet guy, and so I think I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't know what to say, so he says maybe says some things about his opponents that might not come across as good. But honestly, he seemed like a really good dude, and he trains at Extreme. He's here in Vegas. He's been training at Extreme and at the PI, and I've been able to run into him and say what's up to him. And he seems like a genuinely nice guy. And I think most fighters are. I think sometimes he just seems like a quiet guy. So I think when he gets put in the corner to say things, whether it's interviews or, press conferences or, face to face, I think he kind of gets maybe not awkward, but just kind of, he doesn't know what to say. So he just kind of, puts his defense up a little bit. But yeah, no, to get a guillotine over Christian Rodriguez was really big for me. You know, I trained with Raul Rosas, and he has a win over him. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, going to a fight, perception is everything. So me thinking, because I've trained with Raul, and Raul is fucking good, and for someone to have a win over Raul can kind of get in your head if you let it. And so for me, I had to kind of like let that, you know, not sink into my head and just kind of focus on just beating Christian because I knew styles make matches, and I knew my style was, you know, perfect to beat a guy like Christian. And also not only that, just to get a finished win over someone who hasn't been finished. I mean, I got, you know, when I fought Jordan, he'd never been finished. Sean Woodson had never been finished. C Rod has never been finished. So all three of these guys got finished by me. So not only is it, you know, a feather in my cap to get finishes over those guys, but it's another feather in my cap to get the first one over these guys because obviously later in their careers you might get finished, you know, again, but I was the first one to step in there and get the job done when nobody could. So you know, it's a feather in my cap, and it's a nice one to get to put under my belt, you know, especially coming off that Ramos fight.
And thank you so much for your time, man. This was awesome. It was my first interview on my channel. It's so cool to have one of the coolest fighters I've ever talked to on here. And before I let you go, you want to say anything to the public?
Oh yeah, I always like to shout out to all my friends and my family and all the fans out there. Obviously, my management team, Iridium Sports Agency, Jason House, and all the guys underneath him. Those guys, like I said in the, you know, earlier in the interview, that if it wasn't for them with the Sean Woodson fight, I don't think I would have been back in the UFC. So I owe it all to them and getting me back there. And then obviously you for having me on, brother. And then you know, once I figure out, once I get a fight nailed down, we'll have to get back on here and do a little pre-fight interview as well.
Thank you so much, bro, for your time. Have a great rest of your day, champ.
Yes, you as well, brother. I really appreciate you, man. Take care.
I'll take you to T2.
Thanks.